Terrorism is the public justification for these programs because it's the easiest to convince people not to oppose it. But these programs were never about terrorism. They're about diplomatic manipulation, they're about economic espionage, and more broadly, social control. These are stories that indicate, for example, the British intelligence agency that's a part of this community had been found to be surveilling human rights groups. And this was not known. The public wasn't allowed to know about this. It couldn't be challenged in court until journalists revealed what was going on. But these capabilities that were, again, intended for use against terrorists were being used against groups, human rights organizations, such as Amnesty International. We saw that they were capturing the emails of journalists and international media. And in fact, in some of these stories, including in Canadian documents, I believe this is a story by the CBC, that the GCHQ, again, the British intelligence service that's a part of this Five Eyes spying alliance, that's the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, New Zealand, and Australia, had classified investigative journalists as a threat who rank somewhere between terrorists and hackers, right? So they're not as bad as terrorists, but they're actually worse than hackers. And so this ultimately raises the question, and I would argue answers the question of, well, why are they creating these systems that intercept communications about everyone, despite the fact that they're not effective against terrorists? Well, the answer is, when you create a haystack of human lives, a bucket that collects all of the records of all of your private activities, it's about power. When you collect everything about everyone, you may not understand anything in aggregate. You may not be able to prevent any attacks. But once someone comes to your attention, you know absolutely everything about them, and they no longer have any power at all to affect change against you.
I used to work for the National Security Agency, the NSA, at Fort Meade, Maryland. Post 9/11 laws are being purposely misinterpreted to say that since we, the USA, reserves the right to kill terrorists anywhere, anytime, that if we lower the criteria to less than probable cause in regard to the terrorist watch list, which was done in 2013, then thousands of random people can be put on the TWL, terrorist watch list, no questions asked. DHS has made a separate for-profit DHS entity and is selling kill contracts on innocent people to buddies in the military-industrial complex to torture and kill, to test on humans weapons like gases, poisons, directed energy weapons, nanoparticles, secreted medical chips, and even networks of chips that, according to the Pentagon, comes in torture protocol 1 through 5, at least. Another protocol being used is to order law enforcement to write off anybody who complains of stalking harassment and being tortured as crazy, and they are forbidden to help the person denied constitutional rights. InfraGard vigilantes, under the auspices of the FBI and the fusion centers, are paid to stalk and harass the victims so that the harassment mimics what one-dimensional psychologists immediately assume is schizophrenia, delusions, paranoia, when it is not. This constant harassment was perfected by the former East German communist secret police, the Stasi, as psychological warfare to destroy dissidents. Since there is millions of dollars to be made from using non-consensual human experimentation, even to lethality, this program is viciously covered up with an intricate network of paid conspirators.
Since late last year, U.S. and Canadian diplomats in Havana have complained of hearing loss, nausea, headaches, and balance issues. Now, new documents show some ended up suffering mild brain injury. The State Department confirms some diplomats were medically evacuated to Miami for treatment and testing. Officials are investigating whether the injuries could have come from a type of covert sonic device targeting diplomats' homes directed by the Cuban government.
My household has been under sonic attacks since at least late July, early August. I've lost one of my cats to it. I have a favorite dog who's dying from the lung damage that sonics do to you. There have been nights I didn't know if I would survive. And I have sent messages to the police here trying to tell them what's going on, and I'm ignored. And I think, I don't know, I may want to say a couple things. I am involved in 2 lawsuits right now. There was one that I filed against the National Security Agency, and it was accepted by the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission in 2010 and sat on the shelf until recently. So it sat on the shelf for 7 years. And I suspect that NSA told the EEOC judge to just sit on it so that they could have a chance to kill me. So they have not quite managed to do so. So what they've done is said, okay, well, we've managed to get her in trouble in Florida. So now's the time to come after her with the EEOC case because she spent all of her money trying to defend herself against false accusations in Florida. So now we're going to have the judge bring the court case off the shelf so she can lose because she can't pay for it. Well, let me tell you what that court case with the EEOC would prove. Okay, it is a solid tie to gang stalking, slander, and now to the use of directed energy weapons on the civilian population by the federal government, by NSA specifically, but by the federal government itself. So this is a direct, concrete tie if I can win it. Years ago, in 2009, when I was getting fired for nothing, I attempted to get the ACLU involved, and I was told that they don't really do much in Maryland because of NSA stalking and harassing them.
So ACLU in Maryland kind of let you know that they really were afraid to get involved because they couldn't investigate cases of NSA stalking because NSA was stalking them.
Right, to make sure that they didn't investigate cases of stalking. So I was also told by Siobhan Gorman, who had worked for the Wall Street Journal in Washington, that my story, I was trying to speak to her about this, and she said, this is really astonishing that so very many people have almost exactly the same story about NSA security stalking and harassing them, to include journalists. So she confirmed to me in writing in an email that NSA stalked and harassed journalists.
And this is why journalists and mainstream media do not want to touch stories of targeting, do not want to touch stories of organized stalking or about reports of electromagnetic radiation weapons being used on people. They know very well it's going on and they are just afraid to touch it. You know, right. So that's a very important point to underline. Thank you for giving us that information. I can tell you that I've spoken to activists, you know, in other fields, in the environmental field and so forth, who've also told me that there are many activists, hundreds of activists all around the country, all around the world, who are being hit in this fashion with electromagnetic weapons.